Greg Staley of Diverge Media here. Thank you for joining me. I'm here with former RCMP Detective Andy Brooke to talk about the Paul Chiang fiasco. That is Paul Chiang publicly calling for a conservative candidate to be turned over to the Chinese consulate here in Canada, which, if ever done, would have caused Joe Tay, the conservative candidate, to be handed over to a nation that takes Uyghur Muslims and imprisons them, harvests their organs, tortures dissidents, and in recent times has killed Canadians. So thank you for joining us, Andy Brooke. How are you?
Oh, it's great. Thank you so much, Greg, for contacting me.
Well, I reached out because obviously you have a unique background with unique training, and I knew you would have a different view on this than most. When Paul Chiang said these things, I immediately seen that you were online talking about the criminal code provisions that were violated or could have been violated as a result of these comments. So we'll play those comments now.
That's running, most probably is, the Chinese community knows Joe Tay, Zhang Jing. Right? He is looking for the nomination. The Chinese media knows him. He was in the media business in Hong Kong, and here in Canada, he's a radio host, or I don't know, for Singtel Media or Fairchild. He was a media person, so that's all he did all his life. But also right now, he is wanted by the Chinese government, and there's a $1 million reward on his head. So they want, if you guys want to pick him up and take him to the Chinese consulate, you make him $1 million. I'm just joking, but there is a arrest warrant out for him from the government of China, and there is a reward for him. But apart from that, I can't say more than that. Right?
Is arguably worse has been, I guess, Prime Minister Mark Carney's comments after the fact. But what were your takes on the comments made by Chiang initially, and then we'll shift a little bit to Mark Carney's response?
Yeah, no, thank you for that. I kind of want to stick to my wheelhouse, if you will, which is the criminal law, and the political side I'll be soft on, at least from my perspective. When I first became aware of it, and then when I watched the video that is circulating widely on X, it's very clear that Paul Chiang, it's a short video, I think it's less than a minute, is referring to his political opponent, Joe Tay, and he's talking about that he's got an arrest warrant out of Hong Kong by the Chinese government, and that he uses the term as a bounty on his head. Actually, he specifically says a $1 million reward on his head. That's his exact words. And in the setting, when you watch the video, there's some laughter in the background in the audience. And then what he says, and this is quote, Chiang says, if you guys want to pick him up and take him to the Chinese consulate, you make $1 million. He then says, laughingly, I'm just joking. But then, oddly, and I think significantly, he continues. He says, but, and then says, his words again, but there is an arrest warrant out for him from the government of China, and there is a reward for him. But apart from that, I can't say more than that. So he stops himself from saying anything further, but his tone is decidedly different from the first portion of it, when he's casually, if you will, letting this audience know, to the part where the dividing part being, I'm just joking, and then he says, in a more serious tone, and it's quite noticeable when people are listening to it. But there is something in that I think your listeners or your viewers might be interested in, something additional.
Now, as a former member of service yourself, one of the things Prime Minister Carney kind of responded by saying was that this was a teachable moment, and that Paul Chiang, he referred to his 25 plus years of service in the police services. What are your takes on that? Was this an honest mistake, or was this something that any decent officer would have known far better than the general public to never say something like that?
Well, the standard is, of course, higher for an officer who has familiarity and knowledge of the law, and you're held to a higher standard, obviously, and for good reason. But I think the Durham Regional Police, who I believe Mr. Chiang served with for, I believe, 28 years, they said it best, their association, when they learned of Carney, and I'm looking right at their post now, the last portion of it says, moreover, the fact that Mr. Carney used Chiang's policing career as a shield for his actions undermines the great work of our heroes in uniform to their communities each and every day. And I couldn't have said it better myself. In answer also to your question, not an honest mistake, I don't believe that for one moment. This is a glimpse, and albeit probably an inadvertent public glimpse, into the character of Mr. Chiang and what his actions that have been out of view. One thing, Greg, that if I can, I'll just sort of take your listeners or just dive right into the middle of something. In preparation for our interview, I did some looking around at some of the materials that are out there that have been written, and I came across something interesting that hasn't been picked up at all by media, but ought to be, in my view. A number of days ago, Hong Kong Watch wrote a letter. So I think they represent a number of groups, 40 approximately, of activists and democracy advocacy groups for Hong Kong. And they wrote a letter to the commissioner urging him RCMP commissioner to open up a Canadian criminal investigation. So I was very interested in seeing this. Read it. In the cover of their letter, they write, and it's only one sentence, I'll just read it. During his January 22nd, 2025 press conference, reported by Ming Pao, Toronto edition, Chiang stated, and they quote Mr. Chiang, "Anyone here can claim the $1 million bounty if you bring him to the Chinese consulate in Toronto." And he was targeting Tay there, Joe Tay. And I thought, that's not what I remember his words being from the video. So I went back to this, if you will, the Chiang bounty video, which is circulating. And albeit it's only about a minute long, so you just had that. But in that video, those words in the video he uses are not the words in the quote that are being quoted by Hong Kong Watch, which to me says these are different statements made at different times. What we don't know was the quote that Hong Kong Watch is reporting, was it made at the same press conference as this video? Was it done earlier or after? Or is this Mr. Chiang repeating the same message to different audiences over two separate events? And of course, that would beg the question, are there other events? The reason I point this out is because Mr. Chiang, when he seems to realize that he's saying too much, if you will, throws in quickly, "I'm just joking." Well, it's not joking at all, period. I mean, you don't joke when you go to an airport and say, "I have a bomb in my suitcase," or "I'm going to hijack a plane." No one's going to accept that as a joke, and you'll find out pretty quickly if you ever were to say that. But here you've got it being said at least twice. And of course, we're assuming that Hong Kong Watch can, make quotation marks verbatim. So I think it's extremely unlikely that they didn't report that accurately. So we're left with two statements from supposedly a man that said he was joking or trying to quickly throw up that distraction, if you will.
Well, our listeners heard it here first that there could be two times that he actually called for it, not just the one in the video, two times called for the kidnapping of a conservative candidate. And he stepped down and he had some interesting verbiage he used in that statement when he did step aside after Prime Minister Carney defended him. But I'll just read it here and get your comments as well, because I know you had mentioned something about how this was worded. He says this is a uniquely important election with so much at stake for Canadians as the Prime Minister and Team Canada work to stand up to President Trump and protect our economy. I do not want there to be distractions in this critical moment. That's why I'm standing aside as our 2025 candidate in our community of Markham, Unionville. So just comments on that, the way that it's worded in his resignation letter, standing aside and distractions in a critical moment were the two things that stood out to me.
Yeah, as you were reading it, I was reading it along with you, and I noticed in the timestamp for that, he made it in 5 minutes before midnight on the 31st of March. So, just as a margin note, maybe he was concerned he didn't want that coming out on April Fool's Day. Of course, it's not a funny matter. It's not a joking matter. And I think right off the top, just from what's available in the public domain, there is a prima facie case here already of an offense called counselling kidnapping. And what that is kidnapping, of course, is an offense in the Canadian Criminal Code. But here we have an instance where Joe Tay has not been kidnapped. The offense, at least, hasn't been completed, if you will. The offense has been committed, but it hasn't been completed. So what you have here is a counselling situation, and in the Criminal Code of Canada, Section 464 makes a provision for when counseling occurs for an offense that is not committed. Mr. Tay does not have to be committed for action to be taken. These statements made by Mr. Chiang, which, as I've said here, there appears to be at least two occasions, whether it's repeating in one occasion and, if you will, underscoring and emphasizing, which nullifies the I'm just joking, again, distraction that you threw up there.
So, in closing here, the RCMP is investigating into the matter. Are you confident as a former RCMP officer that investigation is going to lead? I mean, is there going to be consequences in your view for Mr. Paul Chiang for what I would view as not only a breach of the public trust, but also potential criminal matter? I think you would agree.
Yes, and I regrettably, with what I'm hearing between the lines of your question, I am not confident in the current state of affairs of the RCMP that they will truly investigate this. And let me just give you a very quick, for your listeners' benefit. I followed the actions of the RCMP across a number of matters fairly closely. Recently, SNC Lavin, about a year ago, I watched all the testimony given by the commissioner. I texted at length, posted at length about that. They had an investigation open in SNC Lavin, a 2-year investigation, and did only literally 4 interviews, or 5 is another number they use. And they supposedly had a 9 to 10 member team. That's absolutely pathetic. I can't even believe that. So they made arguably no serious effort on that. And I won't go off into SNC Lavalin right now. And I've also been involved with the families of Flight PS752, and I've been helping them, some of the families. And we have that matter currently before the National Security Intelligence Review Agency, and we're waiting for a report to be issued, could be any day now, based on the RCMP's failure to open up a Canadian criminal investigation. That's the simplest way to put it. So your listeners don't think I'm just making a statement that's not supportive of the RCMP that I used to be a part of. There is actual basis for why we people can have serious concerns about whether there is going to be, in fact, a vigorous investigation of this. And you got a strange situation here. This is much larger, if you will, than just simply, if you can even say it in those terms, counseling kidnapping, which is a very serious offense. You've got an electoral situation, you've got foreign interference, you've got potential national security. We don't know how many other people. It's safe to say no one's going to assume for 1 minute, no investigator would presume that Chiang is operating alone. There are other people. If there are serious efforts underway to kidnap somebody or send that message out there, that's why you need an investigation. You need it promptly. prevent continuation of the offense. Now, I'll slow down there. I said an awful lot, so I'll let you.
Yeah, I had just pulled up, or I put on the screen here, a picture of Mark Carney and Commissioner Mike Duham in I would call a pretty intimate manner, arms around each other, smiling ear to ear. But it's, as we know, we covered the PS 752 story in some regard with your help, and we spoke to families, and we know the refusal to open a criminal investigation into that matter, when we uncovered some of the evidence that was there, it's no wonder you're left with a lack of confidence in the RCMP. That's just one example. In recent times, S&C Lavalin, as you pointed out, is another. But it kind of begs the question here: if we're in a country where an elected official can make comments that could have caused another elected official to be kidnapped to a communist nation to be tortured and potentially put to death, and there's no consequences for that, potentially, where are we at as a country? I mean, that's the highest pulpit of Canada's elected office that he could have said that from, and signaled to anybody in that community that this had happened and there's a bounty on this man's head. And it's just hard to believe that he might just be able to walk away and no real consequences from that might happen. What are your thoughts?
That would be a very sad state of affairs if he does walk away from this. I'm always very careful about, of course, to be very clear to your listeners, I'm not privy to any information other than what's in the public domain. So what I'm saying here is based solely on what I have seen. And of course, there's much more to this that the public domain doesn't have, or there will be if there's an investigation that's competently run. But the picture you referred to of the commissioner with Carney, I'm actually looking at it right now. It was posted by Carney, not posted by the commissioner. It was done the 11th of March. Highly inappropriate to be posting that. I mean, if they had that for their private scrapbook, no one's going to know. But to put it in a public space, I asked myself about the level of naivete of Mr. Carney to put something like that, because that picture places the RCMP commissioner, Michael Duham, in a situation where he is actually potentially in violation of the RCMP Act and the RCMP Code of Conduct. You cannot show any sort of political activity, and the picture is very, to use my term, buddy-buddy. You know, if Carney wanted to put a picture with the RCMP, there are more appropriate professional images that you could use, not this one. But again, people make mistakes. Does this show a relationship that is not appropriate between these two? It raises the question now that you've seen the picture. And, or, you know, I framed it in terms of Mr. Carney's naivete, is that he just doesn't care. I mean, clearly the RCMP Act does not allow pictures like this to be posted. Maybe Carney doesn't care, maybe Duham doesn't care. I have no idea.
Yeah, it's a very unusual picture. And yes, buddy is, that's putting it lightly. It's just an awkward photo to put in the public eye. And there's a perception that comes with it, right?
Well, and the oath of office that I took, the same oath of office that the commissioner took, refers to, in our duties, doing our duties without fear, favor, or affection of or toward any person. Well, you look at that picture, you cannot read that phrase without fear, favor, or affection and go, there's no affection going on here. Or there's the optics. There's just no way. And the other thing is, too, in the actual code of conduct, you know, where it talks about political activity and members aren't allowed to engage in it. Earlier in the code of conduct, you know, it talks about respect for the law and the administration of justice, and it reads, members act with integrity, fairness, and impartiality, and do not compromise or abuse their authority, power, or position. That picture that statement. And the commissioner is as liable to his actions under the RCMP Act as an ordinary member. And to go back to an earlier statement I made a few minutes ago, the matter that's before the National Security and Intelligence Review Agency in relation to PS 752, that was bringing up points just like that for the previous RCMP commissioner, Brenda Lucky.
All right. I think that's a good place to end our interview today. Is there anything else you would like to add on this Paul Chiang story as it unfolds?
I think you've caught it there. It's unfolding. And I would hope that the RCMP, this is not going to be complicated. And it is a complicated investigation, but I mean, there's enough there to support the charge, in my view, against Mr. Chiang right now for counselling kidnapping. And then the investigation would actually be underway because there is so much more to look at here. We haven't even touched on the national security implications of this and the offenses under the foreign interference. There are so many potential offenses here, but you go with what you have right in front of you right now. It's counseling, kidnapping, and then you add further charges should they become relevant as the investigation proceeds.
Yeah, I think there's a lot on the foreign interference front there that could be definitely prosecuted. But it's just interesting. We'll see what happens. I wasn't thrilled with the Liberal response so far, and we can just hope that the RCMP does a proper investigation. I'm not going to hold out my breath. Unfortunately, I don't like saying that, but based on recent history, I think it's likely that this doesn't get the attention it deserves. And it begs further questions about Chinese infiltration and interference in Canada's political system.
There is so much here. This is just literally the tip of the iceberg, and that may be understating it, quite frankly. I just thank you, Greg, for bringing this up. Here, I communicated this to another journalist in Canada, the fact that there appears to be two statements by Mr. Chiang. So I have sent that out there. Whether that is in fact looked at further by that particular journalist, I don't know. But as long as we as Canadians keep speaking up and speaking out, I am confident that our collective voices will have an effect here. And the RCMP, I'm able to speak because I'm retired, and I will continue to do so. And I look forward to the day when the RCMP has its reputation restored and it is operationally independent, not subject to political interference and pressure whatsoever.
Well, that was Andy Brooke. Thank you for joining us, and we'll catch you the next time. I'm sure we'll be talking in the future, not too far off. Perhaps we'll have you on again if any developments happen in the PS 752 story, obviously, or with the Paul Chiang story unfolding. Thanks for joining us, Andy.
Oh, thank you so much, Greg.
You have a good day.